Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Roda and I'm a doctor working in the UK. And yes, let's address the elephant in the room. I have been away for about 3 or 4 months and I've got a ton of excuses that I'm probably going to leave to another video, like an update video or something, just so people know what's been going on. Today's video is one that's been highly requested and I've really been excited to actually film. It's 9 books you should read in 2022. These are probably my favourite books that I've read over the last few years. They're all non-fiction. I am going to do another video that's only on fiction books, so watch out for that. But I thought, it's 2022, it's a new year, a new chance to start things. Like me, if you've kind of fallen off the wagon a little bit with reading books, I thought hopefully this will kind of re-inspire you and re-motivate you to get a little bit of reading in your day. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. The first book, these are in no particular order by the way, in terms of favourites. The first book is Reclaim Your Heart by Yasmin Mogahed. When I say this book is going to change your life, it's no exaggeration. Yasmin Mogahed has been one of my favourite sort of authors. She's also a motivational speaker, she's a psychologist, she just talks a lot about the Deen and things like that. So when I saw that she's written a book, I obviously had to get it. The book is all about Deen and how we can reconnect with our Deen again and kind of help change our perspective when it comes to focusing too much on like the materialistic side of life. I found that sometimes with these sort of Islamic books, they can come across a little bit lecturing, but this one is really kind of compassionate. It's so beautifully written. It's almost like a comfort blanket type of book, and I always reread it as well. Every time I feel a bit stressed or I feel as though I need to reconnect with my Deen again, this is a really good book to kind of remind you of why we're all here basically. So the next book, which I'm really excited to share, is Edna Eden memoir, A Woman of First. This book is absolutely amazing. If you don't know who she is, she's a Somali nurse, she's a midwife, she's a government minister, she's worked in WHO, she's a lady who's been everywhere and you've probably heard of it already. The book is mainly a memoir about her childhood, her upbringing, how she kind of achieved all these things in her life, all the challenges and the obstacles that kind of were in the way of trying to achieve those things. She grew up really poor in a very traditional household in the 1950s. Women weren't allowed to go to school, they weren't allowed to learn, so she kind of went against the grain and taught herself how to read, and then went on to win a scholarship in London to become a nurse and a midwife. And then she kind of came back, used that skill and that education to try and teach women in Somaliland to try and establish some kind of a healthcare. And one of her dreams was to open a hospital, and there is actually a very famous hospital in Hargeisa. And what I really loved about this book was she didn't let the constraints of her environment stop her. She was like, she had a dream, I'm going to build a hospital. It may seem really far-fetched, especially in those days, but that didn't stop her. At least she was going to try. And she failed many times and ended up much later in life actually achieving what she wanted to do, and literally built a hospital with her own savings, with her own money, because that's how determined she was. I think she's a really good example of a good role model, especially for young girls and young women, especially Somali girls and Somali women, you know, really kind of standing on your own 2 feet and not letting anyone stop you from doing what you want to do in life. The next book is, which I've got on here, is Brian Stevenson's Just Mercy. This book. Listen, I've got a little bit of obsession with like legal type stuff. I always used to read a lot of like crime thrillers, a lot of like legal, law-y type things. I came across him when he was a guest on a podcast I really listened to, Criminal, which I've mentioned in my podcast video. I just really found him really inspiring. So he's this Harvard-educated lawyer who basically took it upon himself, this is in the US, took it upon himself to help people who are on death row. So people who are waiting execution following a trial for various crimes or whatever. He writes so eloquently about his experiences and the people that he's representing. The book is full of compassion, it's full of empathy, and at times it's actually quite heartbreaking as well. He really shows us the unfairness and the injustice that happens in the US kind of judicial system. And the fact that the book has over 17,000 reviews on Amazon tells you everything in terms of how good the book is, and I really enjoyed it. And sometimes I struggle with finishing books, but this one I flew through over like a couple of days. So highly recommend. And the next one is Mind Medic by Dr. Sarah Vora. Again, this is a really helpful book for everyone really. It's all about how we can optimize our mental health, especially in this day and age where there's so much stresses and there's so much risk of things like depression and anxiety. Author herself is actually a consultant psychiatrist, so she has the expertise to kind of talk about mental health and things like that. And this book is really, really good at giving practical advice in terms of how to deal with day-to-day life, essentially. It's one that I come back to quite often. It has a lot of practical advice in terms of how to deal with things like stress and how to reframe our thinking when it comes to things like resilience, parenting, our body image, all of that, social media. It goes on and on and on. There's also a lot of exercises that you can write down in. I mean, I didn't write in the book, but like you can actually kind of write things down on it. It's also a very simple format. It's not too heavy in terms of text, so yeah, definitely recommend for everyone really, everyone who wants to look after themselves, not only physically but also mentally. The next book is People Like Us by Hashi Muhammad. I've mentioned this book already on my Instagram. So Hashi is a Somali qualified barrister who actually went to Oxford University. He wrote this book, which is kind of like a semi-autobiography and also a little bit about an insight into British society. So his kind of story was a refugee who fled war-torn Africa, came to the UK, didn't speak any English, family didn't speak any English, and lived in a very, very deprived area, went to really deprived school, but somehow managed to get himself into Oxford University. And the book is not just about, oh, you know, if you try really hard, you'll become successful. It's not as simple as that. He talks a lot of things about how factors in like UK society can influence how well we do in our life. So he talks about that the way we speak can really either close or open doors. So like our language that we use, our accent, our confidence can affect the likelihood of our success. I think it's a really good book to get inspired by and kind of learn a little bit about the society that we live in. I think it's really good to be aware of our surroundings and try and like optimize and take advantage of things that are there for us in terms of opportunities. So I think it's a really, really worthwhile read, so highly recommend. The next one, which I cannot stop talking about, Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. I love Brené Brown. You've probably seen on my Instagram, I'm always like posting her stories, her quotes, her books, everything. If you're gonna read one or two books of all these books, it would be Yasmin Mujahid's book and this one. For those of you who don't know who Brené Brown is, Brené Brown's a researcher, she holds a PhD, she's a social worker, she's written multiple best-selling books. I came across her in a TED Talk on YouTube, which I would definitely recommend watching if you want to kind of get an idea of what the book is going to be about. And she talks about vulnerability, courage, shame, all these sort of feelings and human emotions that we have, and it was just speaking to me, and I thought I need to get her book. So I went to the library, got it, and then finished it, and then I bought it. It's a book that I refer to quite often. For me, it was really, really eye-opening. So like I said, it's about vulnerability, it's about courage, it's about shame, and how those feelings influence how we look at ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about other people, our relationships at work, as a parent, as a partner. I've learned so much about myself, and I learned so much about my parenting and my relationship. It's really, really insightful book, and she writes it in a way that's kind of almost like conversational. You feel as though she's talking to you as a friend rather than kind of very lecturing and like, you know, you need to do this, you need to do that. And it's one of those books where I've highlighted it so much. I've also got it as a digital copy as well. Highly, highly recommend. I say this to every single book I've just been talking about, but yeah, highly recommend. So the next one is War Doctor by David Knott. Yes, it's a medical type book, and you're probably thinking, how stereotypical, she's a doctor, so she's reading all medical books. I don't read any medical books, well, non-fiction ones anyway, but this one's an exception. Dr. Knott is a UK trained surgeon who spent 25 years of his career volunteering in war-torn countries. So he's been to Syria, he's been to Bosnia, he's been to Sierra Leone, Haiti. He basically uses his skills as a surgeon to help the people that are affected by the war. There's so many books that talk about kind of humanitarian doctors that go abroad and like do kind of really good. I don't know, I found this was a different kind of book. I found it really, really hard hitting, and it was really emotional and very heartbreaking as well. It really goes into kind of a lot of detail about his experiences, but it also talks a lot about the experiences of the people that are there and really humanizes them. This also includes the medical people that he was working with, but also the unfortunate kind of consequences of war. There was that sense of realism that made it seem so emotional and so, you know, you connect to the people that he's talking about. It's quite admirable that he puts himself in these dangerous places, all in the name of, you know, helping people and humanitarianism and all that. So yeah, it's a really wonderful, poignant book, and it really made me think about that, like the humanitarianism side of things when it comes to medicine. Last but not least is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Even though the title sounds really clickbaity, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, not just effective but highly. I think this book was really, really impactful actually. If you're interested in developing yourself on a personal level, on a work level, this is definitely a book to read. I actually read this probably about 5-6 years ago. I remember reading it in the summer just before starting work. So I finished the uni and then we were going to start work in August. I thought I need to read something that will kind of give me that edge and make sure that I don't like humiliate myself or whatever. So I saw the title, I thought, oh okay, this will do. Over the last 5 years, it is a book that I constantly refer back to. And so the title's pretty self-explanatory. So he goes into detail about these 7 habits that everyone should have who wants to be effective in their life. And with each habit that he goes through, he talks about the rationale for it. He talks about what it is and how we can actually practically apply this in our real life. I find a lot with these self-help type books, they talk a lot about the problem, like why is this the wrong way or why should we be doing this, but never actually talk about how to apply it in real life. But this book is different because it does give you actionable things that you can do to actually develop these habits that he talks about. I do have to warn you, it is quite a thick book. It's quite dense in terms of material, so I didn't actually read it in one sitting. Probably read it over like a couple of months. You don't have to read it in sequence. That's the beauty with non-fiction. You don't have to read them in order. Those were 9 books that hopefully you will find helpful or useful in any way. Please let me know in the comments if you have actually read any of these books and let me know what you thought of them. Like always, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.